Extract from the personal journal of Dr. Andrew Rasmussen, Senior Consultant at the Gill Clinic, W1. It started with Lisa Ianson. There had been rumours before that, of course, of disappearing artists, fashion designers, literary critics, and of a sudden dearth of cafe philosophers in Paris. But most people simply closed their minds to it, refusing to believe that such a hideous disease could exist. Even in medical circles, its existence was almost brushed under the carpet, so that now, despite its several-year history, it still lacks a proper clinical name. It's referred to simply as it, as in, has he got it, or did you read that so-and-so has it? But after Lisa Ianson, no one could deny its existence, as she succumbed so publicly, falling ill in the middle of a live broadcast of a late-night TV show. And that's when I realised that this wasn't just another hypochondriacal rumour circulated by a paranoid press, but was a real and utterly terrifying disease that made Ebola look like a touch of the sniffles. The broadcast was replayed endlessly over the following weeks, but I'd actually seen it live as I lay in bed unable to sleep, absent-mindedly scanning through the channels. It was almost as if I knew something was going to happen, something so profound that it would alter all human culture inconceivably. She was fronting a broadcast from a tribal gathering in Somerset, and had been spouting her usual pseudo-babble, when in the middle of a sentence, a fat bass and junglist rhythms on a distinctly Balearic handbag tip, if I remember correctly, we spent months poring over the recording to see if there was some kind of phonetic trigger to the seizure. She stopped talking and released a massive bowel-clapping fart. Then, a puzzled expression on her face, she tried to continue talking, but despite her odd mouthings, no sounds came out. Instead, there was a sickening cracking of bones and a strange, wet, slopping sound, her abdomen folding in on itself as her pelvis cracked open inside her skin, and her chest folded inwards and downwards with a nauseating sucking noise like a basin draining of water. Within seconds she'd collapsed into her own rectum, her painted fingernails momentarily clawing at her sphincter to prevent the process, before these too were lost within its pink ring, and the Channel 4 camera was left focused stupidly on her contentedly pulsing anus. The director had quickly interrupted the broadcast, but even as the late-night adverts for telephone chat lines and local car dealerships flashed across the screen, I couldn't shake the image of the throbbing, fleshy donuts that was all that was left of Lisa Ianson from my mind's eye. No one had ever seen anything like it, and her condition was a talking point across the nation for weeks. However, everyone just assumed that it was an isolated incident, a rare biological occurrence like spontaneous human combustion. But it seemed as if within only a month or two of her succumbing, dozens, if not hundreds more cases were coming to our attention. Its early victims were almost all clubbers of various kinds, which led to speculation that it was somehow related to prolonged and excessive ecstasy use, or that it was perhaps triggered by a certain combination of ecstasy and cocaine, or a specific ratio of E and amphetamines. Because of its unusual nature, studies were even made where the relative wavelengths of sound were examined, and compared to the volume of the PA systems used in it hotspots. From the government's point of view, this had a relatively beneficial side effect, as, fueled by a rabid and ill-informed campaign by the tabloids, ecstasy use stopped almost overnight, those few people who refused to believe what they perceived as propaganda being treated as pariahs by their peers. It was at this time that I started my research work on it, and I have to admit that for a while I too believed what came to be known as the E hypothesis. However, while the majority of its victims were clubbers, sometimes whole clubs would be discovered to be full of tiny throbbing arseholes pulsing away in time to the regular scratch of a needle at the end of a groove. I noticed a small number of other victims that seemed to contradict the prevailing belief put forward by the likes of the Express and the Telegraph that normal people couldn't catch it. A few literary theorists had also been found, in cafes, in their offices, sometimes in the archives of busy libraries, their fleshy ring pieces resting within feet of their new structuralist manuscripts, or winking smugly at the screens of their word processors. This not only confused the medical community, but it also raised panic amongst those who believed that these old academics, many of whom didn't even drink, let alone take Class A drugs, must somehow have caught it off their drug-ridden student body. But as we blindly thrashed around in the dark for cause of disease, let alone a test or cure, the number of victims started to number in the thousands. There seemed to be no link between the increasing number of cases. Sex, age, lifestyle, sexuality, race, all seemed irrelevant. There seemed to be an unusually high incidence in the capital, and relatively few cases in the north, but there seemed to be no carrier agent in the water or the food chain that could account for this. And as artists, journalists, fashion designers and television executives all started to rank amongst high-risk groups, we had to admit amongst ourselves, whilst regularly releasing reports of new breakthroughs in research, that we were stumped. British and French filmmakers were high risk, yet their American counterparts had yet to suffer from a single case. The Times had lost almost all of its staff, A. Gill being the first to go, disappearing so far up his own arse that he was one of the few cases who almost ceased to exist, his succumbing only being verified by microscopic analysis of his keyboard, and the discovery of a few trace rectal cells, while the likes of Gary Bushell continued to pound out EastEnders trivia at an unaltered rate. It seemed hopeless. Homeopaths and faith healers regularly proffered fraudulent cures, whilst others claimed that it was a combination of crystals could align the body's disturbed energy matrices and thus prevent seizures. Fundamentalist Christians claimed it was the wrath of a vengeful God on his hedonistic behaviour, while some groups, most notably the Californian It Transcendental Astral Pioneer Group, claimed that to journey at one's bowels was to raise oneself to a higher plane of existence. If they were right, no one could say, as they all succumbed within weeks of their formation. In the established medical community, we became so desperate that even twisted old quacks like Dr. Emanuel Kokoschka, so-called expert of psychosexual disorders, was asked to help with research into a cure. I remember seeing him once at a conference in Brighton, and the first thing that struck me about him was the distinct relish that he went about his work. I saw him demonstrating the culmination of his feverish efforts and almost salivating as he fitted his Kokoschka rectal brace to a nubile young club chick, licking his lips as he pushed the rigid stainless steel frame into various of her orifices, and wrapped the apparently useless metal struts around her pert young breasts. But the breakthrough came not from any member of the medical community, but from a most unexpected quarter. On Thursday, the 11th of November 2008, the cause of it was discovered, and along with it, a cure.